Tape recorder's running, right? Tape recorder's running.
Employee experience. Did we go too far or not far enough?
That's right.
All right. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hey, Lance.
Hey, Brett.
How are you today?
Doing good, man. Been a little bit. Kind of summertime. Vacations and all that sort of stuff. So it's been good.
Yeah, it's tough too because I have a client call right before this podcast usually, and it's that one client call that always goes over by like 30 minutes.
That's right.
So we've been pretty hit or miss this summer.
It's okay.
Might want to look at changing the calendar time.
Maybe.
But I'm Brett Starr. I'm the CEO and founder of the Starr Conspiracy.
Lance on, I'm Vice President of Market Insights of the Starr Conspiracy.
And we are talking today about employee experience. Did we go too far with employee experience during the pandemic? Is it time to pull back on employee experience? Is it time to go further? I think that every day there is a Rorschach of news out there about people who are doubling down on return to work, come back to the office, stripping back benefits that were provided during the pandemic. A lot of it's politicized. I say this every time we talk about it. A lot of this tends to fall along the lines of attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs that also tend to accumulate around political positions. If you go over to Fox News and you read about, the latest attempt to bring people back to the office, you see a lot of comments about, about damn time, get people back in the office. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Get back to work. Yeah, exactly.
There's a strong sense of, respect and rightness for the notion of hierarchical management and the way that businesses are supposed to run. You go over to a more liberal, news source, and there tends to be, a lot of coverage about clawing back DEI initiatives, talking about, the overreach of executives, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a political, kind of current there as well that I think is important just to know that it exists, because I think we're all aware that we fall into, an algorithm when it comes to regular news, depending on where we get our information. But we also fall into algorithms when it comes to topics like this. And our opinions are often shaped by, kind of the penumbra of, other news coverage about other things that tilts into these areas and demands that we take a political position on topics like employee experience and, CPS and all that. So anyway, did we go too far? Are we at a moment where we need to, focus as much or more on company performance and individual performance as we do employee experience? Or did we not go far enough, or is it somewhere in the middle? Have we just not figured stuff out yet?
Yeah. And that's, really kind of what I talked about in the newsletter, when you're probably going to be, watching this last week, what I really found. So organizations, so there's definitely, like you said, it's kind of dropped along some political lines, some attitude, behaviors, and belief lines around just sort of like, hey, it was fun while it lasted. Give back. Let's get back to work, okay? And then like I said, another side of that, which is like, hey, maybe we didn't go far enough, or maybe we're going to continue to kind of go down the path. And so I kind of looked at the latter group of folks, like the folks that were still investing heavily, still getting on those great places to work lists, and not just the ones you pay to get on, but the multiple ones that are a little bit more objective, that sort of thing. And so I found like 3 things that these organizations that are still investing in EX do, kind of just like from like when we looked at like why are they like continuing to do this? Like, why aren't they pulling back? In spite of, I think, lots of organizations thinking like this is common practice. We're going to bring people back to work, or we're going to cut benefits, or we're going to stop, having so much emphasis on diversity because it's, it's work time again. Mm-hmm. This was a nice distraction. So let me know. I'll go through the 3 points that we could talk about each one. Yeah. So point 1 was like, this is what they do. Like, it's kind of like built into like, so a lot of these programs, a lot of these companies have like kind of done these EX focused initiatives from far before the pandemic, you know, when this sort of stuff came into focus. And so it's just something like it's kind of built into their DNA. The two companies I sort of mentioned, or three companies I mentioned, was like Amex is one, which is a sort of legendary, just not on the customer service side, but like obviously on the customer experience side, but also like connecting that to employee experience, right? Cisco is another one, which is like always top these lists. Kind of think of them as like Silicon Valley dinosaurs, but they still pull in great talent, and they're able to do that. Wegmans, a grocery chain, which sort of just like, instead of sort of leaning back and letting people sort of fail during the pandemic, they really leaned into their employees, and they continue to do so. So, you know, it's kind of built into that company's DNA. The second one is some of these companies that are maybe a little bit newer or doing newer initiatives like diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, realize that change is going to take a long time. So it's not something that you can take care of within like a single business cycle, right? It's going to be something, some of these companies, you know, like Provivity, Hilton, they're like, this is a generational change. And so you can't like, it's almost like building infrastructure, building an office building. You can't like pull back investment as things kind of go up and down. You have to sort of figure out what's going to be our baseline investment. We're going to continue to do that. And sort of related to that one, the third point is that even short-term failures like aren't necessarily an indictment on the EX forward strategy. And so you saw this with Cisco. So I mentioned them in the first point, but they've laid off some folks because they're, again, reorganizing their business, reinventing what they're doing. Atlassian, who has like been this very remote forward workforce, like, hey, we made a mistake. It wasn't being EX focused. It was that we overhired and we got really ambitious, and you know we messed up there. And really, if we're going to talk about layoffs as sort of an indictment of EX, well, Facebook laid off thousands. So did Amazon. All these companies have less EX friendly policies and vision. Yet are still laying off employees. It's just kind of what you're doing in the tech sector right now. And so those were sort of the three that I pulled out when I was looking at just companies that are continuing to like push forward, kind of what was driving a lot of those actions. I don't know if you had any reaction to any of those or if you want to talk through all three, but yeah.
Well, I do, of course, and I think, it's often, we live in a bubble,
right.
We live in a work tech bubble. And, just to kind of go back to the political point that I made earlier, which I think is relevant to this overall conversation because it's about shaping perceptions, right?
Yep.
I think outside of work tech, like if we were not immersed in work tech, we are immersed in an environment where, ostensibly everyone in work tech is about employee experience one way or another. And so you don't see the same, kind of break in one political direction or another political direction in work tech that you see outside of work tech, where I think prevailing attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs tend to make these, contrasts more sharp. I think about, work tech software companies, redundantly, who it's the people that they're selling to, right? And so the people that they're selling to, some of those organizations, are invested in EX, and some of them are not. And their orientation around EX intensified in one direction or another, based a lot on their political views of the relationship between, companies and workers and customers, during the pandemic. I know that a lot of folks out there, a lot of companies out there did things for EX during the pandemic, and they held their nose at the same time. They felt like there were things that needed to be done, but they didn't really want to do them. It's like virtual work, was necessary in some industries. And so they did it, but it wasn't a commitment to looking at flexible work arrangements. It was, more of a spirit of the times thing and a necessity. Yep. And they tried to claw back that, as quickly as they could. On the other side, I think you had, people who kind of naturally lean in that direction, more so of creating employee experiences. And I think a lot of times that's like a cultural thing within organizations, and it ends up being justified by ROI, but it's really about the kinds of, cultures they want to create, the kinds of people they want to be. And the pandemic served as a backdrop or context for getting aggressive about things they always wanted to do and test. For me, and I know a lot of people like me, the pandemic became a testing field for all kinds of wacky, crazy ideas. Because a solution to a lot of things was definitely needed, and it wasn't clear what that solution would be. Like, for instance, creating collaboration in a virtual work environment, or how to make a decentralized autonomous organization effective, et cetera, et cetera. And so you got to try a bunch of things, but the people who were already kind of leaning in that direction were more aggressive in the things that they tried, and they held on to a lot more of those things. And so I think, if we get outside of the distortion field that is work tech and just kind of look at, the world at large and the field of decisions that people can make around this, what strikes me about, the list that you put together and the, the case studies that you share about those organizations is that no one's really debating performance.
Yeah.
I mean, no one really can debate performance. Companies who want a more traditional approach, a return to normal, whatever, some of those companies are performing great.
Right.
Companies who have very, aggressive EX policies that are, focused on flexibility and, I heard on the radio the other day, someone said Fridays are dead forever. As a commercial real estate person said, Fridays are dead forever. Okay, well, that's another group of people who are already leaning in that direction. And I think, some of those organizations are doing great. Some are doing better. Some are doing worse. So I don't really hear people saying that with evidence that one or the other is a better way to create amazing company performance. Though I do hear people making anecdotal claims about what it takes for their company to be successful. Not all companies, but our company needs to be working together in the office. Our company needs this, our company needs that. And usually with no real evidence that one case is true or not true. I find it incredibly interesting. I think that the example that you used about infrastructure, really struck a nerve with me because, I grew up in Texas. I grew up in South Texas. And I grew up during the Don't Mess with Texas era. And I grew up during the infrastructure era of Texas. And when, I was a kid, when I was a teenager, and I drove down a Texas highway, it was pristine. It was new. It was clean. It worked well. It was bigger than it needed to be, all that stuff.
Yep.
And I was driving down the highway to the airport the other day, and I remarked to Jennifer that this didn't look like a Texas highway to me. And it happened by degree. It's like slowly, the focus on, infrastructure and the quality of highways and bridges and stuff like that by degree over time led to where we are now, at least in the, the part of the country that I live in, which is, the infrastructure is not inspiring. The highways are not inspiring. Don't mess with Texas means something really different now than it did when it was, a litter campaign and an infrastructure campaign. And I think that's, when you talk about this being a generational shift, or some people referring to it as a generational shift, that's one of the things that we have to be aware of, is that, if you don't have a vision for the direction that you're moving in, then you're not going to make incremental progress towards that vision. And if you just keep doing everything the same way that you've always done it, you wake up 10, 15, 20 years from now, and it looks like, your company is an old, highway that hasn't been kept up and doesn't keep with the times. I don't think that it's absolutely necessary for any company to adopt aggressive, EX policies per se. I do think it is incredibly important for companies to know what they're doing and why they're doing it, and be able to communicate that. So
that's right.
Thing, I'll say this last thing and I'll shut up. But I think mostly, typically the problem is not in people being committed to or not being committed to, effective employee experience strategies or doing things the right way. I think typically the problem is they haven't thought through the past, present, and current, situation and outcomes associated with decisions that they're going to make over time. DEI is a great example. That's not something that, you have to fix or that you can fix overnight. It's something that you have to make constant progress to. But if you don't have the intention of making progress, 10 years from now, you will not have made any progress. And that's a problem. I think it's important for organizations to be thoughtful and intentional about the employee experience they want to create and what that means in terms of the, implied contract between the company and the worker.
Yeah, I mean, that all makes sense to me. I think one of the challenges is I think a lot of organizations do struggle with even if there's a vision or there's an intent there, communicating that intent and doing so consistently and staying true to that vision over a period of time. And that was one of the things that I brought up was, some of this, to your point, some of these rollbacks in policies and that sort of thing were probably predictable. Like if you just communicated, and like some organizations did this actually really well, said, hey, we're working remotely as long as we need to we want to stay in business, we want to continue to grow, this is an opportunity for us to find new ways of working, but our intention is to come back to the office. And I think some organizations did a really good job of doing that. Some organizations may have said, we want to go remote forever. And they had good intentions about that, but they didn't think through the consequences of what that meant for the organization. Like what you said, there was really kind of a failure of thinking about like, what does that mean? Like, we're never going to have everybody together. That's not good. Like, I want to see everybody again. I didn't realize what I was saying, sort of thing. And then I think some of it was like, we're going to say this because we need to grab people right now because it's a low unemployment situation. It's a talent, like we've got talent deficits all across the organization. We need to make promises that people want to keep. And as soon as we get leverage again, we're going to pull the rug out and do that. So I think it's not like one thing is overwhelming on that. I think there's a variety of approaches to your point. I think the challenge for a lot of organizations is like, how do we communicate that consistently? How do we like share our vision? And then if you are one of those rug pullers, well, fuck you. Like, don't do that. Like that's just shitty.
Well, I know that you would never say anything bad about Sherm or Johnny or, anything like that, but I will. Because, that notion of, employees have the upper hand right now, but we're going to get the upper hand later. And so let's bide our time. And then we can, that is pre-planning for the rug pull. Right. And when you've got, the president of the most important professional association in HR delivering that message over and over and over again, that's important. And that means something. And it's no bueno. It's not a good message to send. And it's not, it's not a power dynamic. And I think if we get real, like if we get real for a minute, Lance, I think that there are many confounding issues at play here, which is, employee experience, customer experience, and shareholder experience are three different realms, and they all require a unique focus. And I think a lot of times people are not really thinking about employee experience as a separate and, a domain or a separate realm of experience. They think about it merely in terms of the impact on performance. Yep. And so almost all things around employee experience are, discussed in terms of the impact of performance of the organization. And so when things are clawed back or when things are, offered, like at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of times it's couched in terms of performance. In the negative case, we need to do this because, people aren't performing well. Managers can't keep an eye, on employees, right. Stuff like that. The reality is performance, company performance is a separate issue than employee experience. Does employee experience have a tremendous impact on company performance? Absolutely. But if you say that the only tool that you have to impact company performance are very, binary choices about employee experience, being in the office versus being virtual, having a diverse workforce as opposed to not being woke or, not being woke. And that those things are striking at the heart of performance and therefore need to be addressed from the scope of performance. That becomes the context. Like, we have to get rid of our diversity program because it's harming performance. We thought it was going to help. It has all these unintended consequences. It's harming performance. It's bad for everybody. So we're going to get rid of it. And the reality is, I think a lot of people right now are worried about the performance of their companies because of this whacked out economy that is difficult to predict. That seems to be going great, but doesn't feel like it's going great. In different segments at different times.
That's right. Yeah.
And they're super concerned, right? And so they use that fear to claw back things about employee experience under the auspices of performance. The reality is, you can focus on improving performance and you can focus on employee experience as two separate things and not artificially tie the cause and effect
conflating
together.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a complete conflation. That's the word I was looking for, but I couldn't find it. So instead I used 1,000 words.
No, it's totally fine. I think one of the challenges here too, Brett, and you mentioned it, measuring performance against these, against different scenarios with EX has confounded people for a long time. It's just, it's very hard right now. Probably impossible to do that. It was. I don't think you could have really done it before now, when maybe things were a little bit simpler. And so I think, to your point, it's much more straightforward to sort of disconnect the two, and do your performance thing and look at it objectively, look at it as a multi-factor thing, which, like you said, does include EX, but not EX in a bubble, not EX in a silo. Look at customer experience, look at shareholder experience, look at your sales and marketing. You just wrote a book on this stuff. I think there's a real challenge for organizations to really think about this stuff beyond to sort of these, I think these really, disruptive assumptions about, what good work looks like. And I think one of the challenges that people are looking for is well, how can we A/B test this? How can we maybe benchmark ourselves against companies that are in our peer? And no, you're not going to be able to do that. Yeah. So you got to really separate those two. So I wanted to pull that point even further because I think that's a really critical piece. Is if you're conflating those two things, stop and start actually making a connection point that makes sense, rather than trying to be well, if we do this, we won't we won't have to lay people off. With EX, if we do this with EX, we will have to lay people off. It is never like that.
No, it's not. And this is our model. We're an experience agency. We focus on employee experience, customer experience, and shareholder experience. Our model for employee experience has 5 domains: employer brand, recruitment marketing, candidate experience, work experience, and employee success. And we talked about this a year ago or more. Why do we distinguish between work experience and employee success, both under the domain of employee experience? This is the reason. Because work experience is about stuff that touches the work. It's about, there was a question that we batted around for a long time about where does performance management fit? Performance management fits in the work experience. That's about, what do people need to do in order to drive the economic engine of the organization? And how is their performance calibrated with the success factors of the company that makes it profitable, that makes it grow, whatever the business goal is of that organization? That falls under work experience. Employee success are all the things that, help people bring their full selves to the work. And so recognition, well-being, DE&I, all that stuff kind of fits more into the employee success domain. Those two things are separate. It's important to get both of them right, but you don't have to rob from one at the expense of the other, or conflate them, pin the lack of one on the needs of the other. And I think we see that all the time. Perfect bluntness, we struggle with this, right? It's it's hard for us as an organization of very intelligent, creative people who mostly work in an autonomous environment to talk about the performance components that are necessary to drive the success of the agency and we struggle with it in terms of how to talk about those things so that it doesn't seem to be at the expense of employee success, or what most people would kind of refer to as employee experience. And it's hard, but it's worth doing. It's worth distinguishing between those two things, up to the point where, your drive towards performance actually is, violating, the promises and expectations that you set.
You go overboard.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've gone overboard.
Yeah.
We've done that. And I've seen a bunch of organizations.
Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely really common. I mean, I think, again, kind of going back to our vision for our employee experience, really separating the employee success from the work experience is it's always a good reminder, because it's really easy to just sort of intermix those things. But when you think about employee success as like sort of the building blocks within a person to give them the best chance of succeeding inside the organization. Mm-hmm. And so it's all internal stuff.
Yep.
And so when we think about, like when you say recognition, it's connected to, other things, but it's really about getting inside the heart and head of somebody. Same thing with, well-being, same thing with, like when you think about like learning and like building skills and those sorts of
mm-hmm.
things. And when you think about work experiences, like the things that are external, which performance, like, so when you connect that person to a company's goal, all right, that is strictly the domain of work experience. Not that employee success has nothing to do with it, but that like employee success is doing one thing, work experience is doing another. And like you said, even if you know this stuff, it's a struggle to not go back into the habit of just saying like, it's all just the same sort of stuff. It's easy to conflate and that sort of thing. And so you need constant reminders about, kind of where to draw the line there, and how to be successful in that. Once you sort of realize that the two step sides of the coin, basically, it makes things a little bit clearer. Doesn't make some of the conversations easier, or some of the challenges easier, but it does make it clearer what you need to do. Right. Well, and I think that's what a lot of leaders are looking for right now.
Yeah. And I think our model makes it part of the conversation. And that's what's important, because, for many, many years, the work experience was not part of the employee experience conversation. I'll give you a very specific example. Project management tools, huge industry. Every company's got something that they use to, get the work done inside a company. Well, it turns out that the system that you adopt has a profound impact on the overall employee experience. Is it creating too much friction? Is there not enough friction? Is it changing your culture? Is it change the way that you do things by how, it expects work to be planned, or how people are supposed to be organized in order to, kind of track them back to the work and stuff like that. And so for most of, modern history, those were not conversations that happened in HR. Those were conversations that happened in IT. Or, at an executive level or something like that did not include HR. So at least it's part of the conversation now, that things that are in work experience are impactful of employee experience, just like things that are employee success, which previously was the real domain of HR, right? Was most of the employee success stuff, the recruitment marketing, the candidate experience, the employer brand, and then all the employee success stuff. The work experience stuff was, mostly around, like compensation and benefits, or, whatever. So, it's part of the conversation now, and I think that's important. But now that it's part of the conversation, doesn't mean we need to conflate it all, and see it as like a zero-sum game. I've got two nags that I think are, kind of relevant to this. I just really want to complain about it. I'm not even sure if it's relevant. I just said that so people think it was, as I get to complain about this.
If it is irrelevant, then this is the great disclaimer.
Yeah. Two things. Number one, I am so sick of, hearing work leaders and work tech companies talking about building ROI cases and business cases for their solutions and for the systems that they want to adopt inside an organization. And here's why. If a vendor has to build a business case to make it obvious or make sense why their type of solution is good for the business, they've already lost, right? Like, you're not going to convince anyone that employee recognition is a business driver if they don't already feel that it's a business driver, right? And the buyers are often, put in that position because they believe it's the right thing to do, but they've got to convince everyone around them, and they try to convince people with numbers and a business case rather than trying to convince them with the, kind of obvious, aspects of, what's beneficial about a great work experience or a great employee success experience or whatever. And I just see so much time being wasted. And it sets up this scenario that we're talking about, which is, whatever happened to just doing things because it's the right thing to do. Right. If you believe DEI is the right thing to do, then you should do it. And you shouldn't need, a business case that says this is going to drive a 3% increase in this or a 1.5% increase over there in
Right.
order to justify it. Because what that does is when that gain doesn't manifest, or when some other, like if you've tied something that's just the right thing to do or makes sense to do or intuitively everyone agrees to some kind of business outcome, and then business outcomes falter because of things that are sometimes beyond our control, like wacky, economies, pandemics, wars, shit like that. Then it makes it easy to claw back that stuff and say, well, it didn't do what we said it was supposed to do. Well, what's DEI supposed to do? It's supposed to create diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? In many ways, tying DE&I as an example, tying DEI to a business case is kind of antithetical to what
That's right.
DEI was, what it's, meant for. And it makes it easy to claw back on it, in times like these. So, and it's just a big waste of everyone's time as well. Because most of the time when I see work tech vendors building those business cases, or when I see buyers, asking for those business cases or soaking up a lot of time to try to create them, those are the deals that never go anywhere.
Yeah, I always feel like that's just a soft no, right? I mean, nobody wants to give the hard no. Everybody just want to kind of just say like, well, build a business. Oh, you know what? Our CFO said no, like not now, like not strong enough business case for it. And it's like a soft. I feel like it's a soft no, right? They never had their heart in it.
Yeah, I think that that's the case a lot of times. But in Vino Veritas, I've had a lot of drinks with HR people over the years.
Sure.
And when drunk, I have talked with work leaders who are tortured about if they could just get, one or two more business cases proven, then they could finally convince her. Like they actually believe it, and that they're actually trying to do that, and they're trying to work in partnership with people to get it done, and it still never goes anywhere.
That's right.
Because it's the person that they're trying to convince, or the group, or the people who aren't bought in to begin with. People buy stuff that's obvious. People buy stuff that's obvious. If you have to explain it to them,
gotta do it. Yeah,
you got to do it. So that's my first nag.
Yep.
My second nag, relevant to this, space that should exist between, work experience and employee success, performance and employee experience, et cetera, is the moment that we're in right now. And the moment that we're in right now is that despite the fact that all the signals are that, the economy's doing great and the job market is, tighter than it's ever been, and, et cetera, there are a lot of companies out there who aren't selling anything, who are really, struggling in a lot of different ways. And what's happening in this moment is that people aren't talking about it. They aren't realizing that it's a shared condition. And so they assume that they are the only organization within their competitive field, within their industry, within whatever, who are experiencing what they are experiencing. And therefore they're over rotating towards internal considerations and improvements in order to overcome what they see as a problem that is only relative to them and not a problem that's broadly shared in the market. Yeah. And this is private companies, right? Because everybody knows what's going on with public companies, but the vast majority of companies are private. And what is happening because of that is, in the effort to have an impact on company performance, organizations are changing models internally that don't need to be changed, and they're switching from an outcome-based orientation to an activity-based orientation. So I don't trust that you're doing the right things to drive the outcome that we want. I used to measure you on the outcome that we're trying to achieve, but now I'm going to measure you on the activities that result in that outcome based on what we think are the activities that result in that outcome.
That's right.
And I've talked to, tons of people in different contexts who know that they're being asked to do things that don't actually contribute to success, but they know that they don't do them, they're going to get fired because of this activity, based orientation that we're in. And so, my nag there is, take stock of what is within your control and what is beyond your control and what other people are experiencing before you assume that it's employee performance and the structures that, manage, monitor, et cetera, employee performance, that it's something wrong with those things. And, to take that all the way to its logical conclusion, yeah, people will start with the process. They'll say, well, we need to redo it because it's not working. They'll, try a bunch of different things. They'll focus on activities, but ultimately they all come to the same conclusion when they're not performing well. And that conclusion is our people must suck. It's them. They must really
doing
suck.
It right.
They're not, we just need better people.
That's right.
And it's like, it's just not true. Because those are the people that are going to go somewhere else and are going to do great when it's possible to do great within a certain context. Right. So that's the other thing. I just think that people are overcorrecting, in performance management, in clawing back employee experience stuff, et cetera, based on the zeitgeist, which is so hard to define right now, and so hard to distinguish between what problems are we causing for ourselves and what problems are manifest in the zeitgeist.
Yeah. Those are both good points, but I do want to wrap them up. I do want to wrap this up because
I said it might not be relevant, right?
But no, I mean, it is relevant. And I think one of the challenging things is sort of pulling yourself out of like your bubble. Mm-hmm. And so I want to get back to that. Like, so whenever we look at, did we push too hard into EX? Have we not pushed hard enough? What's the verdict there? Like, how do we conclude this episode? It's like, depends.
I think everybody's got to get it right for them.
Yep.
And I think that the thing that is most important to me in the context of this conversation is that we create that space between what we're doing in employee experience and our perception of how we're performing against what we perceive to be how we should be performing. Right. So I think a lot of people are clawing back things in employee experience because they perceive that they're detrimental to the performance of the organization, and they're making those decisions in a vacuum without actually understanding what's going on out there in the world with other companies within their segment, et cetera. So all I would say is have a vision about where you want to go and what you want to be from an EX perspective, and then do the very simple but difficult thing of talking to other people and finding out what their experience is in organizations similar to yours, to find out what they've tried that's working, what they've tried that's not working. But most importantly, how's business? How's business? Because when you get a bunch of people together in a single industry, most of the time you find out that everyone is doing about the same relative to how they've always done, right? The leaders are still leaders, but maybe this is a tough year. Et cetera, et cetera. And I think that context is important because then you make this, bigger decision about, okay, well, if everyone is, suffering or doing great or whatever, is that, a broader condition that needs to be addressed and fixed as an industry? Or is it something that doesn't really need to be addressed at all or change our plans at all? And I think that's what's missing.
Yeah. See, those nags made sense.
Makes sense.
Just had to like bring it back together, bring it back around.
What's going on? You got to find out what's going on, man. What's going on?
That's right. Figure it out, and I agree with you there.
Well, thanks for your time, Lance.
Thank you, Brett. This was great.
I'm Brett Starr.
It's on.
And we will talk to you in the future. I won't say next week. We'll see.